this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Client Podcast. I am here today with someone who is very near and dear to me. Nicole and I have known each other for a while now. I have had the honor of working alongside her, seeing some of her professional growth and seeing her branch out and start her own private practice. So in this consulting episode today, it's going to be an opportunity for you all to get to know her a little bit better, learn about her career climb, and we're going to talk about something that I'm sure all of you can relate to, which is imposter syndrome. So Nicole DaSilva, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be on your podcast.
Yes. So there is no question that I wanted to have you on here, and I appreciate you taking the time and being willing to do this. I know that different people have different feelings about it, but you have things to share that other people need to hear. So if you could introduce yourself to the audience, I would appreciate it.
Yes. Hello, everybody. So I'm Nicole. I'm an LICSW. I have kind of been embedded in the mental health system within the greater Fall River area for about 16 years now. I've graduated from Simmons College at the time in 2008 with my master's degree and have kind of stayed in the world of crisis intervention since that time. Mm-hmm. I've done a few different things throughout my career path. I've done medical social work, director of social services for a nursing home. I've consulted for long-term care facilities. But my heart has always been in the crisis realm of social work, generally speaking.
So with all of that experience and exposure, what led you to consider private practice?
So over the past couple of years, truly, and really, really heightened during the pandemic, we started seeing, as everybody knows, like a real spotlight on mental health and the worsening mental health symptoms that people are experiencing, and a general lack of providers in our community to meet this need. Mm-hmm. And being the person embedded in the emergency rooms and seeing the influx of people and seeing like what these people are experiencing is stressful, but some of it is normal, and they need an outlet. They need a therapist. They need somebody to work with. And I started thinking to myself, like, I could do that meaningful work. I don't have to be like spinning clients in and out the door and not really feeling like I'm getting them from point A to point B, really kind of feeling like I'm not hitting the impact. I'm not really doing what's needed here. But I had some reservation.
Which we will get to. So I can speak to, obviously, you and I have had some conversations prior to this, and even right before we started recording, being able to relate to the medical model of social work and crisis intervention, and how it's very brief and short term, and how we don't necessarily always see clients or patients for a significant length of time unless they're readmitted. And if they are, we're seeing them in moments of crisis, whether that be medical or whether that be psychiatric. And so we were talking about the level of impact that we can have, and not to minimize the work that we do in those roles, but it sounds like you are looking to be making an impact in a different way. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, part of who I am outside of the professional world is I'm a mom. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, and that's the most important thing to me, in my life. So I saw throughout the pandemic the impact it's had on my children, specifically my almost 10-year-old. Where he, was in his most formative year of school. He was in kindergarten and he got yanked out from the pandemic. He never experienced a field trip. He never experienced having peers that he could sit more than 6 feet close to. He never experienced a school concert until his third grade year, which was this year.
Wow.
And watching his deteriorating friendships, his peer groups, their inability to get along, I was seeing it within my own child and his own peer group, but seeing client after client coming in with the same kind of concerns, parents who were just kind of spiraling about like, my kid just isn't functioning. like, your kid is functioning, they're hurt, they don't know what to do with this, they've been isolated, they're stressed out. And I started thinking, like, this is where the work needs to be. This is it. Like, really lit something inside of me, like, I need to help. And I never wanted to work with kids in the past. It really wasn't my thing. But it's such an area of need. And really, for me, that's where I was like, I have to do this. I have to get something off the ground here so that I can start making an impact in this way.
So what were some of the reservations that you had before you actually pursued your practice?
Oh, boy. So
where do we start, right?
Here we go. I mean, I could go on. So my reservations were, I had been so long in the crisis, the acute side of things. Like, oh my God, do I have the skill? Do I have the skill to bring what I need to these people? Do I have all the knowledge? Do I have the ability to connect with these individuals, across the lifespan, whoever it is that's going to be coming to me? And that right there was my biggest reservation.
Okay. And then from there, because here I am thinking, but you're already doing that with people, and you're doing it at such a crucial time in their lives when they are either experiencing something medical, and I'm sure anxious and scared and operating from a place of fear, or they're in a psychiatric crisis, and you have to develop that trust and that alliance so much quicker. You have a limited amount of time. You have information you need to gather. You have resources that you need to provide, or a decision that you need to make. So I'm sitting here thinking there's no question that you could do that in a therapeutic setting, but that was still something that was on your mind. I find that so interesting. What were some of the other things that came up, maybe more about the business side of things and actually starting one for yourself?
Yeah. So I think business wise, it was like, well, I'm just not a business minded person. There's so many little intricacies that go into it. I went through the whole, do I want to partner with somebody else? Do I want to just solely do it on my own? And at the end of the day, I was like, oh, I just got to do this on my own, because I was so nervous. I was like, I can't get into this with anybody else. And part of that whole fear is like, well, because if the ship goes down, it's just me. Like, I don't have to worry about anybody else. And that is a real fear.
Yeah. So how has the process been for you so far? Give everybody a snapshot of where you are in the timeline and the current state, because I just feel that it is so invaluable for other people that are potentially in a similar place and maybe struggling to take that leap, or maybe in it in the early stages. And it is so normalizing and validating to hear other people share their real experience. So provide us with a timeline and where you're at in all of this right now.
So in January, I ripped that Band-Aid off. I said, I'm taking the leap and I'm doing this. So I started, right? And I told myself by March, first goal, I'm going to be up and running. I'm going to be credentialed with these insurances. And boy, did reality come back and just kind of like smack me in the face. Like, that's right. So I do have some major insurances all set to go. I'm panel, I'm good, and I am working with some individuals, but I'm still behind in Blue Cross. I'm still, Mass Health is, seems next to impossible, which is extremely frustrating to me, because we have a community of need and many people have Mass Health. So that's been extremely challenging. And that's where a lot of my focus has been.
Okay. I feel your pain there for sure. So just to break it down for everyone. So like you said, Mass Health, we're located in Massachusetts and southeastern Massachusetts. And so we both have insurance-based practices, and that is definitely a hurdle for a lot of people. But it sounds like you and I were both really passionate about being able to provide that accessibility to people. And I know that the financial aspect can be a huge barrier to counseling. So I commend you for that, and it will all be worth it in the long run. But what you're speaking to is this kind of unknown where we're relying on this outside entity, and there are time frames and there are moving parts that we don't have control over, which is infuriating. And it is affecting not only you and the goals that you would set for yourself, but it's affecting clients that are really in need. So yeah, I feel you there for sure. Absolutely. So if you could have it your way, there's no question in my mind, March, you would have met your goal. The reason why things have shifted is ultimately because of the insurance that we speak of. But so you're doing this right now on a part-time basis. Is your goal to ultimately transition this to a full-time thing?
I go back and forth about it, to be honest. Like, right now, like full-time's not really, even really on my mind, potentially. And I'm just trying to keep I'm just trying to stay flexible,
Yeah.
And if it does go that direction, great. But I think, where I keep moving my goalposts, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm now out another month for this insurance, and now I'm out another month for this insurance. And just kind of rolling with the punches, so to speak.
Right. So you'll still need to see some more things come to fruition and have more exposure to all that this entails to make that decision. But you're setting yourself up in the event that you do decide. You'll have all of the kinks ironed out.
Yep, hopefully.
Okay.
And that's the thing. Like, I went in guns a-blazing, like really thinking like, oh, this will be like, it seems so straightforward on paper. Like, I just followed my timeline here. And when you start a practice, I think the first thing I would say to somebody is just be prepared to be flexible, be prepared to move the goalpost, because it's just, you're going to hit stumbling blocks, and that's just part of the process.
So with some of the reservations that you had in the beginning about the actual clinical work, and you now getting your feet wet and doing this work as opposed to the crisis intervention or more of a case management role, how are you feeling as your role of therapist?
It feels great, Julia. It feels so good to be able to sit with somebody and to, be able to listen and provide some feedback, and you really feel like you're making a difference with somebody, to walk away and be like, oh, I feel like that went great, as opposed to being like, oh, I hope that stuck, or, hope they get what they need, because you can't follow anything through, and knowing like, I'm going to see this person again, and I'm going to see them in a week, or I'm going to see them in 2 weeks. And we're going to, feel really hopeful and watch this process go in the right direction. And knowing if it doesn't, we can pivot and go in a different direction. I appreciate
you saying that, because not everyone that goes into counseling comes into it with the experience that you had with this alternative. And I don't think that's something you're ever going to lose, no matter how long you do this. So I think that would keep you really grounded in, there's opportunity here that you didn't necessarily have in those other roles, versus someone who straight out of grad school goes into private practice and hasn't necessarily been in the trenches in that sense, that might get frustrated because a client is maybe not ready to do the work, dig deep, be vulnerable, be open, or maybe isn't as consistent as we would like, or all of the things that can happen. Hopefully that will be something that keeps you maintaining that same perspective of, the alternative, how it can be when you don't have that opportunity. So that's really good to hear. So one of the things we've talked about a little bit in our conversations that I thought would be really helpful for other people to hear is imposter syndrome. So we hear that all the time out there in the world, and it sounds like something that you yourself are very privy to. So what has your experience been with it, and how would you define it for someone that doesn't really know the true definition, has just heard the phrase tossed around?
Yeah. So my experience with it, when I really think about it, it is the thing that held me back. So imposter syndrome is absolutely the thing that has held me back and taking the leap until January. What is it? At the most basic definition, it's a symptom of anxiety, your own anxiety and self-limiting belief system. And it triggers your nervous system for the stress response, and it can almost put you like in a freeze position where you feel like completely immobilized. So you have all the tools in the toolkit and you can't get moving. And I really had to dig deep and be like, what is going on with me here? Like, why am I not taking the steps to do this thing that I know can be amazing for me, amazing for other people? Like, I need to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I remember being a huge push for you. I remember us having conversations and you questioning your abilities, and me very confidently saying that what I knew of you and what I had seen in action could absolutely be applicable in a clinical setting. But like we had talked about before we started recording, you needed to experience that yourself. And I guess what I would add is, in our specific situation as clinicians and ultimately therapists, imposter syndrome for us can really show up where we've got the degree, the education, the credentials, the experience, the license, but even still doubting our ability to do the work that we have been trained in. And in all reality, it is so much about relationship building and meeting people where they are and understanding their life in the ways that they're willing to share it with us. But it's like that nagging voice that keeps coming up of, am I a fraud? Like, I have my own stuff going on. Am I in a position where I can really be helping somebody else go through this? Or I experience my own anxieties or doubt or questioning and so how has that shown up for you? How are you combating that and still pushing through?
So I think like imposter syndrome can there are 5 different like types of imposters, right? Like, so like there's your perfectionist kind of person where like you accept nothing less than perfection. If you can't do it or there's a possibility it's not going to be perfect, you're just not going to do it. Right? Like the superhuman kind of personality. You have to work hard to measure up, just work late, do this, do that, be better than everybody else. That's one type of, kind of way of coping. The soloist, who don't ask for help, don't reach out to anybody, like do it all yourself.
Right. I got this.
Yeah. Your achievements are only yours if you do them completely on your own. Like, that's a scary way to go. And the expert, which is where I felt in, like, you can just never have enough knowledge. You don't want to start. You're fearful to start something because, like, what if I don't know it? What if someone exposes me for not knowing something? And this is 100%, I think, where I fell kind of short. And in the process of starting up this practice, and this is important for people to hear too, is I've learned that even having that kind of expert mindset, like I need to know, somebody's going to come to me and I need to know how to address this particular concern or this particular thing. No one's an expert in everything, right? No one's an expert in everything. And the beauty of this private practice and the beauty in being an ethical and good therapist is to say, like, we have to pause here because, we might not be a good fit, even in your initial consultation, but I can get you to somebody who is. I can help with that referral. I'll get you where you need to be. Yeah. And just kind of realizing and owning that piece has made me feel so much better. I don't need to be the expert in everything.
I respect that. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about that extreme case where someone may come in with something that they're looking for help with that might be beyond your scope. And that can happen to all of us. But I think even on another level, the difference about counseling versus like a coach or a consultant, the clients are really the experts on themselves. And we can sometimes get into this place of they could bring literally anything under the sun into these sessions because we're their point person for support in that safe space. And it could be anything from a transition, a job loss, a diagnosis, a relationship ending, whatever the case may be. And you're right, we can feel that pressure because I think of who we are naturally if we're going to come into this profession as someone who's nurturing and a caretaker and we want to help and we can sometimes put others first. Where, like you said, we can feel like we need to solve it all. And really our role is facilitator. It's facilitating change. It's providing that space and that therapeutic relationship for people to really be open, honest, vulnerable, to recognize patterns, to hopefully make some changes, but have somebody there that is helping them through the process. And so I'm glad that very early on in this role, you're realizing that that pressure can lighten a little bit and that it all doesn't have to be on your shoulders. And I agree that's so important for people to hear. So if you were to formulate it in a question with your own, obviously, knowledge of imposter syndrome, you've got it down, you have your own experience with it. What is something that you would say is on your mind that may be asking kind of someone in my position versus where you are? Maybe I can offer some insight and some things that might help you through that challenge.
So like, I guess at the core of it, like when you're feeling like an imposter and you're feeling completely overwhelmed, like where do you start? What steps do you take to start getting past it? Well,
I think you're already off to a great start in terms of knowledge and gaining more self-awareness. And you've already identified where you fall on that spectrum. You're being open about it. You're having conversations about it. I mean, we were talking about this before you even took the plunge and started in your practice. You didn't let it hold you back. You persevered. I think so much of it comes from your own experience in the therapy room, working with a variety of clients, figuring out who you do your best work with and what techniques and modalities work the best for you. That I can honestly tell you never fully goes away in my experience. So I say that as someone who has been providing therapy ever since graduate school and my internship. I also say that from the supervision that I provide to my team and my group practice and consulting clients that I have at all stages, whether they're starting or expanding, they all experience it to some sort of a degree. And I think it ebbs and flows like most things. There are some times when it ramps up and we feel it more, maybe because of our own stuff in our own life, a challenge may be experiencing outside of our role as a therapist, or it could even just be something that a client presents. You're like, I'm not really sure what to do with this. Or the clients that come in and don't have a lot to say. And we are primarily talk therapists and need some information to go off of. So I think the point that you just made is such a good one, where you're already getting comfortable with all right, let me do a full assessment here. What is really going on? Is that something that I am capable or qualified to handle? Is it something that I could maybe take a training on, read a book, seek out some consultation or supervision? Or is it something that they really need a specialist for? And being okay having that conversation with someone and knowing that you are doing right by them, and that it's not necessarily a detriment to you. There are so many therapists out there, and we're not expected to know everything. We can't take all the trainings and achieve all the certifications and specialties. And so it's okay to identify who is your ideal client and really strive to serve that population. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you just nailed that all down beautifully, Julia.
Well, a lot of it was things that you already had brought up that make so much sense. I think it's more acknowledging that you are further along in that process and handling it better than probably you think you are.
Yeah, I think just, the overall overcoming of it, like you can be confident and you can have humility. You can recognize self-doubt that doesn't serve you. Mm-hmm. I just feel like as humans just across the board, it's hard to let go of what doesn't serve you. We are hardwired to take the easy path in life. Mm-hmm. Your brain is almost always going to tell you, there's risk, there's judgment, be alarmed, mm-hmm. be concerned, and like really being aware of that. And as a therapist, doing your own cognitive work with yourself to say, mm-hmm. like, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And you can get past it.
Another thing I would say is how invaluable it is to have your go-to people that are also in the field, that are doing similar work, that can help to really normalize the experience, mm-hmm. and where you can discuss the generalities of some cases that might be particularly challenging. And I know that now, coming from starting out in solo practice and transitioning to group, I was really missing that multidisciplinary team that we were used to at the hospital, or coming together and getting that perspective and more of this full picture, because we only see so much when we're working with someone in isolation, mm-hmm. and we're only exposed to so much, and having other people weigh in and share some of their experiences has been invaluable. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's been a critical step for me. So, of course, I started with you, mm-hmm.
And
kind of picking your brain and talking to you about the what ifs and, all of that stuff. And I've reached out to a number of people. I've been invited to a number of, kind of supervision groups that people are doing. And it's been incredible. There are so many people out there who are rooting for each other, who mm-hmm. really want to see everybody do well. But that part, it can be scary to do this work on your own, mm-hmm. Because, again, going back to the whole concept of like, we're not experts. And
mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need that person to bounce your idea off of. And I personally have always professionally operated in that way. Like, you get something kind of like sticky and like,
mm-hmm.
let me go talk to so-and-so. Find your trusted colleague. Find that trusted person. Even if you're not comfortable in the group supervision setting.
Sure.
Find somebody. Talk to people, because talking it through is extremely helpful professionally amongst your peers.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so grateful to hear that that's been your experience and that you've been open to it and that you found that. But I would also say that despite our independent licensure and the fact that we don't require a supervisor anymore, should not prevent us from always growing, evolving, questioning, and getting feedback. And that is something that I don't necessarily see in all clinicians. And I do think it can be a real detriment. And even the most seasoned clinicians who have been doing this in multiple settings or for an extended period of time, we all have a lot to learn. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Even just, meeting with the people that I'm working with now, I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this for so long. Like, this is basic. And I'm like, oh, but what if? Like, let me go, track this down. And I go down the rabbit hole of a different technique or, So yeah, absolutely. Staying fresh, taking the courses, reading the books, diving into the research. There's always so much more to do. Always so much more to do to stay fresh.
There is. And I have every faith and confidence in you because I think the key to imposter syndrome is to recognize when you're experiencing that doubt, to not just suppress it. It's there. We acknowledge it. There are things that we can do, obviously, to work through it, but not to let it hinder us. It's you doubt yourself, but you continue to move forward regardless. And that's exactly what you did. You took some time where you kind of sat with it. It was there, but you didn't let it hold you back. And you got what you needed, whether that was seeking out other people, whether that was kind of dipping your toe in. I think it was really smart for you to do it in the way that you did because we have all these outside variables like insurance, et cetera, where you really want to make sure that it's right. And like you said, it's almost like a blessing in disguise where you now have this opportunity and this time where if that wasn't a barrier, you could potentially have gone into this full throttle. And I believe in the baptism by fire model in some regards, but I also think that there's beauty in really honing in on what we're feeling. And I think if we go into it full throttle, there's not always those opportunities to really reflect and be as aware as we can be of what we're experiencing in the therapy room or anything else. What are your thoughts on that?
Agreed. Just agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so true.
Well, I give you a lot of credit for taking the steps that you did. And it sounds like you're working on finding your people. And I really do feel like that promotes longevity in this field. We as human beings are not meant to go through life or our profession alone. We definitely benefit from the support and the understanding and the acknowledgement from other people. And we don't always give ourselves that credit of doing good work. And like you said, kind of remaining ethical and considering where the client is coming from and providing really good care. It's so important to be around other people that are doing the same. So I guess in summation, it's really ultimately about this is going to creep up from time to time. And it does when you're early on in an endeavor, all the way to being someone who's seasoned and even close to retirement. We had a clinician in our practice who was retirement age, but still really loved doing the work. And I loved the fact that she came into our group practice with this mentality of, I know that I have so much to learn and I'm here to share, but that she actually wanted to be paired up with clinicians that were new graduates and earlier in the field and would come away from those supervisions feeling like I learned so much. And so it seems like you're experiencing some of the same. And even with working with clients that are all different ages and getting exposure to those that are younger and, oh, I like this more than I thought I did. And we're never going to know unless we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding that niche of people. And that's what it takes, just the exposure, things definitely throughout this process. I've gone from like, oh, I'm definitely going to work with this group. And this is definitely where I think my strengths are to be like, oh, well, maybe I want to do something a little different. And I think that's just going to be kind of ever changing. And maybe I'm not going to have a niche. Maybe I'm just going to enjoy working with people across the lifespan as I have. And that's fine.
Well, I think about other people's journeys. I mean, some start out in community mental health where you get exposure to everything under the sun. You can't really say no to a referral. You have an open spot. It gets filled. There's beauty in that, but you get that safe haven of working for an agency and getting that supervision and those team meetings. And so for you, there is nothing wrong with getting exposure to as much as possible to really decide. So on that note, going into private practice, who did you think your ideal client was going to be?
So I thought my ideal client was going to be like the moms.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to want to work with like the stressed out, burnt out moms of the world.
Yeah.
And then it kind of started to shift for me. That was like really where I thought I was going with it. And I was like, no, I think that I want to kind of work with the kids, the adolescents, the 10-year-olds, the 11-year-olds, the 12-year-olds who are adjusting and transitioning and trying to figure out, how do you deal with your peers and like the things that seem so minimal to adults, the things that can be so easily brushed aside that are so important to kids. Mm-hmm. And again, I think I see it because I see it in my own children.
Sure.
So I think I have a real passion there. Another area that I hope to work with, down the line is Parkinson's patients and their caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from a very personal place for me.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I lost my dad to Parkinson's, and it was a tough road. He was sick for a long time. But he had the mental health side effects that came with it. He had the dementia symptoms that came with it at the end. I saw what my mom went through as, being part of the caregiving team when I went through. And I just feel like I have so much to offer in that area. But again, being insurance-based, there's barriers there. There's barriers there because most of these people, thank God, are older, Medicare type kind of patients. So I'm getting there. And it's a moving the goalpost, just being patient and like, it will come.
It will absolutely come. So there is beauty in this journey. And I think it's wonderful that you came in with this idea, but you are still moldable and willing to be flexible. And in all actuality, it sounds like there is beauty in some of this challenge because circumstantially you ultimately ended up working with a population that you didn't anticipate enjoying so much. And what I love about that age, and I'm sure you can agree, they're still not easily influenced, but you have more of that opportunity to connect and forge a relationship that can have an impact. And they're not solidified and set in their ways yet. And it's made me a better mom. Thinking about things therapeutically with that age group and having somebody come in and share these things about their own parents and how they approach things and their reactions and the things that they really need and can express maybe to us that are really hard for them to share with their own parents. Are you experiencing some of that?
I am totally experiencing some of that. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad. Well, and you started off talking about that level of need that came from the pandemic and what you experienced with your own children, and what an incredible place where it's here you are actually doing that work with that age group and having a positive impact because there is such a need. There are just not enough providers that are out there doing this work, unfortunately. Waiting lists everywhere and people that are help seeking, but there's a delay.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Well, tell everyone the name of your practice and a little bit about it. So you're strictly virtual now, right?
I'm strictly virtual. The practice is Motivational Healing and Wellness. I try to offer flexibility. I try to be available in the evenings, daytime hours. I don't have a set schedule, so to speak. So I'm trying to kind of meet the need as it arises. And again, I'm seeing people right now kind of across the lifespan. But waiting on Blue Cross, waiting on Mass Health, but I have a majority of all the other private insurances. And
what are the insurances that you're credentialed with now?
So I have Cigna, I have Aetna, I have Optum, Harvard Pilgrim, United.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will include all of that information if anyone is looking. And what is the best way for people to complete a referral if they're looking to start therapy with you?
So that's a great question. It is through my website. I utilize Simple Practice, and it's so long. I actually would have you put it in the show notes because it would be impossible.
I will do that. Then it's easy. It's just a point and click.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for your collegiality through the years, for the conversations that we've had, and for the work that you're doing. Couldn't be happier that you are out there helping people in a different way than you had been, but using all of those skills and just enhancing them and helping to meet the need out there.
Oh, well, thank you. You have been such a wonderful mentor and friend to me, and I really, truly could not have gotten off the ground without you. So thank you.
Oh. Well, I am so glad that everybody gets to hear this journey. I hope that it's helpful for all of you. And I guess the key is do not let imposter syndrome hold you back. It is possible. Right. There are going to be roadblocks out there, but if you have a passion for something and you have the skill set, there are resources, there are supports. I think we're both here to tell you, do it.
Do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.